Hello, welcome to This Stuff. I'm Nat.
And I'm Ossie. And we're joined this week by Hurk, comic smith, and narrative graphics engineer. It's his official job title.
Hello.
And we've known you about 20 something years, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
Since the 20th century, I reckon.
Yeah, very, very late 20th century.
Late in the 20th century, you remember, in the Cold War. And we used to do comics stuff together back in the day, and you've gone on to do proper comics with square spines, proper graphic novels that can go on your shelf and you wouldn't lose them. You'd be able to find them. And books with drawings.
books
with drawings. And your latest book with drawings, Jinx Freeze, it's out this week, 7th.
Yes, I think it's out on the 7th of October, and it's from Avery Hill Publishing. And I don't there's a book plate that comes with it if you pre-order from them, so you have to get in quite quick to pre-order it because it comes out
but it's so now. Soon. You haven't even got a copy yet, so you know.
No, haven't got it yet. I haven't seen it, but
it's fresh off the press, but you haven't got it, so it's in a van.
To be fair, it's in a van, but there's no petrol in the van, so
that could be it. Yeah. That could be it.
It's just in a van in a lay-by in Kent.
It's warm off the press. Yeah, it was hot.
I know what
it's
it looks
cooling
like,
down.
You know,
but I haven't seen it.
What's it about? What's the premise?
It's kind of, I suppose it's sort of like a crime. It is got elements of like a crime heist type thing going on with bits of sci-fi maybe. It's kind of hard to explain. It is a bit of an experiment. There's lots of stuff in it, but yeah, it is kind of a crime caper at heart, but with lots of other stuff kind of mixed in.
And I imagine it's probably quite funny and looks good.
Hopefully, yeah. I'm pleased with it, and I hope it. Yeah, I think it does look good, and maybe it is meant to be funny. So yeah, I think I did it.
And the crime connection today, we're going to do the top 5 TV cops, because you're a crimesman as well as a comic strip. I'm not saying you're a criminal, but I think you revel in the crimes.
Yeah, I do often have cop characters in my books. So we sort of we did think about it ages ago, didn't we?
Yeah.
And we sort of didn't know whether to go for actual cops or sleuths and detectives that didn't work for the police, but we've ended up
very much in the realm of the 5-0, the Bizzies.
I just realised, just occurred to me, this is incredibly bad timing for doing a top 5 cops, because the police are probably at their low point in their popularity in the entire history of these isles.
This is true, but I think we're dealing with our cops are all fictional.
They are,
so they're kind of like it's a different bracket, I think. And I think certainly the cops on my list, some of them, I'd say a couple of them are quite bad cops, but in generally, you know, they're kind of quite likable.
Good cops.
Good cops. Yeah, I mean, you know, at the best of times, I guess there's probably, you can be critical of the cops. And some of the best characters are probably cops who are a bit, well, actually, I'm trying to think if any of mine are bad. Yeah, no. One of mine is a kind of, he's on the cusp of being a bad copper. But he's fictional. They're all fictional, and they're good characters.
And we kind of flip between detectives. Whether we could include private detectives or whether it was just the police. Well, we've ended up with just the police, right?
Yeah, I've tried to be quite strict about it. And there's some that I would have put in who would be in honourable mentions. But it's also given a scope for us all to meet up again and do cinematic police detectives or fictional detectives who aren't in the police. So we've got a lot of scope. PIs, private dicks.
Private dicks, but we're doing public dicks. Yeah,
we're doing public dicks.
Good stuff.
Top 5 public dicks.
Top 5 public dicks. Hurt, will you kick us off with your number 5?
Okay, right. My number 5 is Commander George Gideon of Scotland Yard.
Oh.
Right. And this is one that I've got to admit, my list it's very skewed and on nostalgia. It's very nostalgia driven, right?
This is the best, and I think this will tie in more with the kind of books you do as well.
And it's but this is one that I didn't. It's not nostalgia because I didn't grow up. This is well before my time. This was sort of 1964 to 1966, and it's John Gregson. And yeah, it's very much. I've chosen it because I've got into it very much in the last couple of years, watching it on sort of repeats on TV. But it's like the epitome of that kind of. Apart from like maybe there are other cops like this, but it's that sort of good, the sort of ultimate good copper. Sort of English Bobby type thing, although he's not, because he's actually the big man in charge. He's like the commander at Scotland Yard.
And is the show called Scotland Yard?
Show's called Gideon's Way.
And right.
There was a film, I think it's 1958, with Jack Warner.
Oh yeah.
As Gideon. So that
Wasn't
was
Jack
about.
Warner also Dixon? He was Dixon at Dock Green, wasn't
Was he Dixon at Dock Green?
I think
it's
he
very
is,
much
Jack
in that.
Warner.
This copper
Cozy.
is very much in that. Yeah, very cozy. And so yeah, he was originally played by Jack Warner, but that was a film, and this is the TV show, and it's John Gregson, and yeah, he's very good in it, and it is very cozy, and they split it up so that they sort of focus on his home life a bit, and it's all very old-fashioned and twee, but it's very sort of it's very.
I don't know Gideon's Way, but I reckon that sounds up my.
I think you'd like it. Yeah, it's worth a watch, and it's.
How are you watching it? What channel is it on?
I don't think it's on right at the moment, but I have been watching it on Talking Pictures, in between life insurance adverts and mattresses adverts.
Oh man, I love Talking Pictures. I feel like
and you get it now
of a certain age. Well, I have intermittent signal on Talking Pictures, which I find incredibly frustrating. I seem to get it for about 6 months a year. Very much for a while, I was getting up early every Saturday and Sunday to watch Runaround was on in the mornings for a while. But if I'm watching a long-running serial, it's really I find it quite frightening because I'm worried that I'll get into it and then I won't have it one week. But over lockdown, I was watching Talking Pictures a lot. It really came through for me in that dark period of time. And I got really into Budgie on Talking Pictures.
Oh yeah.
Great show, Budgie. Anyway,
yeah,
he's not a cop.
They're showing a lot of on the weekends. They show a lot of the Children's Film Foundation films, and a lot of old ones I've never seen, like quite early ones.
I'm not as keen on the early ones, but I just think maybe that's nostalgia as well. I like seeing ones that I've got some memory of, or sort of 70s era most. I
do prefer the 70s ones. The sort of early. Did they do them in the 50s, or were they just early 60s?
I think so.
They always have a professor whose lab is in in the countryside manor house, and he's got a whole laboratory in there, and he's just invented something. There was one where I don't know, he's invented some oil detector, which is like a little briefcase that detects where oil is.
Yeah, always a briefcase.
And obviously that's going to be a prime target for villains to have that away.
Of course.
So,
course.
But yeah, talking. But it wasn't. Did I say Jack Warner? It's Jack Hawkins in the film.
Oh, Jack Hawkins, right? Yeah.
Not Jack Warner. Jack Hawkins.
Jack Hawkins is great, actually. I'd certainly watch a film of Gideon's Way then. Be up for that.
So I take it Gideon's Way is very much in the old Scotland Yard, not the newfangled Scotland Yard. Must be.
Yeah. This is
the centre of town.
Original old Scotland Yard. Or was it called New Scotland Yard then? I don't
No,
know.
it was called Old Scotland Yard. No, I think it was just called Scotland Yard.
Scotland Yard,
And
probably.
it didn't become Old Scotland Yard until they made the New Scotland Yard. It's a
That
bit
makes sense.
It's
Now
like
you've
when
said
you
that.
become like, Mr. Jones Senior, but you don't become that until you have a child.
True.
Even if you get old. If you're old and childless, you're still Mr. Jones. You might even still be Mr. Jones Jr. The same happens with Scotland Yards. I'll do my number 5. My number 5, and mine are going to skew a different way. My number 5 is Detective Bobby Simone of the New York Police Department, played by Jimmy Smits on NYPD Blue in the 90s. I don't know, probably into the 2000s, but mostly in the 90s. And to me, as a teenager, he was like the coolest guy on the telly, which now I'm like, that's ridiculous, because he's like a guy in a trench coat with like slick back hair, and he has all these lame lines, and he never smiles really, even when he's like he falls in love, with his colleague, and it's Kim Delaney, and she's great, and they have a great relationship, but he just kind of looks at her all cold all the time. He never kind of smiles or shows much warmth or anything really. And he returns as a ghost after he's died. That's pretty good. Really classy when they do that in a show that has no other kind of mystical elements.
Yeah.
But they're like, like our biggest star or second biggest star, because probably old Andy Sipowicz was the star. But it's like, we've got to get the other guy back as a ghost. And the show's a bit over by then, really.
That always creeped me out when I was a kid, when there'd be like a TV show that was, just run of the mill, just a normal, like the one I can think of off the top of my head is The Waltons. There was an episode of that where there's a poltergeist in it, and her, she's got like one of those like Raggedy Ann doll things that comes to life, and he's like rocking on a rocking chair on its own, and they're going, so does that mean they're real? Like, this is the Waltons.
If you bring these into something which is otherwise a totally straight show, that's messing with things,
Yeah.
See, they do it occasionally on something like Neighbours, but Neighbours feels like it can do that. It feels like the credibility of the show is enough that sort of, you go, sure.
Neighbours could do anything, really.
Yeah, when your sets aren't even
dreams.
2-dimensional, they're 1-dimensional. You can do anything, because it's like, it's like paper cutouts.
I saw a Neighbours it's probably a couple of years ago now, and I hadn't seen Neighbours for like, I don't know, maybe 20 years, maybe more. And it just happened to be an episode which had Paul Robinson sees Jim Robinson's ghost, and Jim Robinson, and I went, I can't believe my luck. I haven't seen it in 20 years. Of all the episodes to watch, I watched one where Jim Robinson pops back up as a ghost.
Was it him, the actor?
Yeah, they got him back, yeah.
Because he's very successful,
Yeah. I think it's because all those shows, I think, at the time were filming in Australia as well. So
did they do it like Obi-Wan or Yoda? Was it like a sort of hologram?
No, it wasn't. No, they didn't do anything like that. He just kind of showed up and had a bit of a chat. And I think it actually turned out that the reason they did it was that it was kind of an anniversary special. It was like a regular length one, just happened to be on, and I was like, wow, what a treat! It's like, and you know what? Had I known it was an anniversary special, I might have made an effort to watch it, see what was going on, especially if I knew it's going to have Jim Robinson's ghost pop up.
Right, you've derailed this thoroughly, but Detective Bobby Simone from NYPD Blue, I loved it at the time, and I thought he was great.
I wasn't as into NYPD Blue. I never quite got into it. What was he? Because they had David Caruso for a bit. There was Dennis Franz, wasn't there? He was Sipowicz, who I like now, but at the time I hadn't really seen him on stuff. But I now like him from like Brian De Palma films and things. And you had David Caruso. Then I think it was Jimmy Smits.
Yeah, he's a replacement.
And then I think it was that blonde guy, wasn't it, who came in, who was the little kid from Champ, who grew up to be like a police detective. Yeah, but I was never as into it as a lot of things were.
It's kind of like I don't think I've ever seen it, to be honest. And that's what my list is. My list is very like, when I looked at it, going, well, there's not really anything after a certain period, really. And I know the weird thing is, since even probably like maybe the last 20 years, there's a lot of really good cop shows and
Yeah.
really good characters, and also not just men. You know, there's a good diversity now, but I haven't really seen a lot of them. It's not the sort of thing. So this is one that I'm not really up on.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like I've missed out though. I feel like NYPD Blue is probably a good one, and it was always a good reference point for shaky cameras.
I think
Wasn't it? It was always.
I think there's much better stuff come after it. You know, but it was an important stepping stone to get to your other good American cop shows that have come since.
Sure.
You know,
I think it was Bochco, wasn't it? Who did
Stephen
Deadwood and
Bochco.
stuff.
Yeah.
My number 5 is Lieutenant Frank Drebin from Police Squad. It's a show that I haven't really revisited, or any of the Naked Gun movies. I should probably say that Frank Drebin is Leslie Nielsen in the show Police Squad, and it's probably the only overtly comic one on my list. But I was thinking about how much I remember when I guess it was probably at the time Naked Gun came out. They released Police Squad on VHS, and it was before they started showing it, I think, on BBC Two quite soon afterwards. And I'd never seen it before. I don't know if it was on earlier than that, but I wasn't aware of this TV series at all. And I was kind of blown away that there was basically a Naked Gun TV show before the Naked Gun. And I remember it being, at the time, watching that VHS, and it kind of being wild at how funny it was. Like I remember not laughing at anything like that as much, and just being kind of like almost like hysterical watching it. Right from the kind of, you know, the opening credits of the police siren, and it just going to all different places, or upside down, or as bumper cars, and all that kind of. Apparently, that was like, it was based on an American TV show I was looking at today that was called The New Breed, which was also starred Leslie Nielsen. And much like Airplane, he was just this really serious actor that they were just basically getting him almost to like remake old shows that he'd done, starring himself a bit older, where he's basically kind of taking the mickey out of all these old shows he used to do. It's so weird now to see him in anything where he's serious, or he's kind of not playing anything for laughs. And certainly growing up, I never was aware of him in anything remotely serious. He just seemed to be this kind of middle-aged bloke who was showing up in these sort of comedies from out of nowhere. I had no idea that he'd been this sort of essentially like TV actor in Hollywood for years and years and years. And I think with like Zucker, Abrams and Zucker, he really was just recreating, like Airplane, I'm pretty sure is just a remake, and I think it has a lot of the same dialogue from another disaster aeroplane movie that Leslie Nielsen was in, playing virtually the same character. And this is the same, I think. This is a thing, like it's sort of based on, there's a lot of series which I don't think we got over here that it's kind of based on. But I do remember that show being kind of so funny. And I'm almost worried to revisit it in case it's like, I'm sure it's silly and dumb, but whether I would still find it funny. They even spun it off over here. Do you remember? They did it as when they used to do the end, when they used to do the freeze frame, and the credits would roll over the actors trying not to move. And they recreated it. They did an ad. I can't think what the ad was for, with Leslie Nielsen, basically doing that same gag, where it's like a sort of freeze frame for a bit where, and there's one where that really made me laugh, where it ends with him laughing and pouring coffee. And then it goes to the credits where he's still pouring coffee. And there's another person holding a mug of coffee whose hand's being burnt and he's trying not to move. I still think of that a lot. This is that great bit of sort of physical comedy. It's my number 5.
I used to love that. In fact, he was going to make my list, Frank Drebin. And I can't remember if I saw it before the films come out or not, but they definitely used to show it either late night slot on sort of BBC Two or Channel 4, or maybe even that sort of early evening, like 7 o'clock slot on BBC Two. But I was definitely aware of it. But I don't think there's only about, is there only about 8 episodes or something?
There's 6 episodes.
6 yeah.
episodes. It got cancelled.
It's crazy.
So like yeah, they only made like 6 of them.
Perfect for one VHS though, right?
Yeah. And at the time that was 2. That's how tight they were.
Yeah.
You had to get 2 VHSs to get the whole series.
Yeah.
And yeah, because I remember
the complete box set.
Yes, it's from 82, so it may well have been on earlier without me seeing it. But I remember it got re-shown again quite soon after we got the VHS of it, and apparently that was it. It was just a thing that came on, didn't do well, but then got repeated a lot in the States, and then had had a cult audience. And the fact that there was so few of them, and that's what eventually led them to doing the movie. That they were just like, "All right, we could make a whole, we could do a whole film with this character now," because he's sort of established as this sort of. It was a failed TV show essentially.
I love it. Failed TV show, turn it into a film, as a blockbuster film series.
Right, my number 4 is the complete opposite to my number 5, and it is Jack Regan from the Flying Squad, from the Sweeney, played by John Thor from, when was it on? 74 to 78.
Is that
and
wow.
Yeah, I don't know how many, 54 episodes. I don't know how many series, but yeah, he's a bad cop, really, isn't he? So he's a bit, it's that sort of what's become that cliche of the 70s, sort of rough, tough cop. But I think he's got such a good lot of lines in it that such good dialogue in it. It's Euston Films that I kind of like most things that they do, and apparently they filmed it. They're Scotland Yard or wherever. Is it set in Scotland Yard? But their office, they filmed it in the sort of Euston Films offices. So it's in like Hammersmith.
I was going to say
everything they filmed was about 1 mile from the office.
I know it's often in like is it Richmond or around that way? You often see bits of like Fulham and places like that. You sort of see bits and go, "Oh yeah, I've been there."
Yeah,
it's
sort of recognisable.
Yeah. I should probably say as well that my number 4 is also Jack Regan. So we've got a double up. We've got a double up. Yeah, I like Jack Regan a lot, but he's a bad cop. He at the time, I mean, he's kind of the sort of no nonsense, tough cop. And I guess the idea is that they kind of justify it by having it that the villains are super tough. These are bad people who have shooters. So he also has to kind of match them, go toe to toe. And it's a British show. Like you say, it's Euston Film, shot on film. And at the time, looked so much better than any other British TV show. And there was a pilot, which was like a TV movie. And I think initially they were saying, I guess we'll do like a sort of studio TV version of it.
Yeah,
and then
Regan,
they just fronted the money and just went, they went, no, let's do it properly and have a proper. And so with that, they were able to make it feels tougher. And by shooting it on film, it has a more sort of realistic quality to it. So it does feel like it's automatically kind of changed TV overnight just by making those kind of decisions, by having something that suddenly looks realistic and tough. And when you've got all those shows like Life on Mars, where they're kind of going, let's try and do a sort of Jack Regan style cop again, you sort of, when you compare them, you realize something like Life on Mars is really like a cartoon Jack Regan, whereas the Sweeney is like a proper tough show. It's not to say it's not funny, but it is quite a hard show. I think often when it's repeated on ITV4 or whatever, they're very cut as well, because it's very violent, very hard and tough. But one of the things about it, the decision to shoot it on film, and just the kind of quality of the writing, which I think is it Ian Kennedy Martin, I think, rather than Troy Kennedy Martin. And it makes them really watchable, which is why, for the longest times, it's probably why you don't think it's as old as it is, because it was just repeated again and again.
Yeah, it was on all the time, right? It was just on always.
And they're really watchable. It's only really things like haircuts that date it. It's a very
cars,
yeah,
definitely
cars.
I just,
Yeah.
all I
And
can think of
shoes.
is hopping out of cars, running around another car, and sort of like, you know, slamming someone against the car. And it's like, all those cars are rubbish. Like, they're not cool. They're not. There's maybe one cool car in the show, and then there's the rest are just like rubbish 70s cars.
I used to have a boss who was like an ex-copper, and he was very much in the sort of village Bobby type mould down in Surrey or somewhere. And he said in their building, like, and this would have been back then in the 70s, in the building at night when that came on, all like the CID would be in there watching it, like avidly, like getting all the lines. And then the next day they'd be using all the lingo in the station, all the catchphrases and that when they arrested someone.
That's hilarious. It's the opposite of what they do now, which is like send scriptwriters to the police stations to copy down what they actually say, right?
Yeah.
You got any favourite lines from the Sweeney?
I quite like the we're the Sweeney son and we haven't had any dinner, so unless you want to kick in, tell us where it is. There's one where they're playing football and he kicks the ball over the wall and he says, "Oh, you've got to have football." He goes, "Football, you know, little round thing, you kick it." Yeah, I saw on YouTube actually, there's a video, I don't know if you've seen that, of Dennis Waterman's This Is Your Life. Not the complete episode, but there's footage of Eamon Andrews speeding around in a police uniform in an old Rover, and John Thor is in on it, and it's Dennis Waterman's This Is Your Life. But it's like 1978, so he was only like 30.
Yeah,
so,
he would have been young.
I know he would have done lots because he's a child actor and everything, but still, he hadn't even done Minder then.
No, it's all pre-Minder for Waterman. Yeah,
I used to think that like you wouldn't do that now with This Is Your Life. If you were doing This Is Your Life now, it would be all really old people, because anyone younger would be like, no, I'm not doing that because I'll never get any more roles, because it'd be like, that's the end of my career, you know. like how when they try and give out those Lifetime Achievement Awards, they all get turned down all the time because people are like, no, I'm still touring, you know. That's Tom Jones. Obviously.
Yeah, I got it. I got it. Because it was also like it was made at the time that there was all that kind of huge police corruption thing came out, kind of for the first, not that police corruption was a new thing, but at the time when the kind of press got hold of it, and that was all the flying squad. So they kind of had to reflect that as well. But it was kind of interesting as there was a bit of life mirroring art, mirroring reality, almost by accident, I think, to the point where it became, I think in the later episodes, they almost had to make, episodes where some of them, but not Regan, were taking bungs from villains, and you know he had to sort out some of his own. So it was that, like, but that's, you know, at the same time he's like, he's not a good cop, but he's like a kind of he's sort of an American style Dirty Harry, I guess, or he's got that sort of, I guess that's probably more of an influence. But it's a very watchable show. Like it's one of those shows that almost feels a bit like it's sort of seen as almost the kind of show that Jeremy Clarkson would watch, but it's actually a really good watchable show. You know, it feels like
it's almost become such a almost like a trope, like an idea. Yeah. It doesn't actually bear relation to what it actually is if you watch the show, which is like, oh, this is quite, it's almost bleak in how kind of tough it is, and and it's kind of interesting that's part of it, that it does become a thing that what the time might have been seen as quite hard going, but it sort of shows it is actually reflective of a lot of what was going on. And if anything, it wasn't going nearly as far enough into what was actually happening in the real flying squad of the 70s. My number 4 is another American one from the same era as my number 5. It's Detective Frank Pemberton of Homicide: Life on the Streets, played by Andre Braugher. And to me, that's like the most intense cop on TV ever. The most intense, and one of the most intense performances by an actor. It's just almost oppressive. He's like a guy that you kind of root for, but he's kind of terrifying. And it gives this real kind of sort of, I assume he was a theatre actor before, his you probably know that, but like he just got this super intense, like, almost like theatrical Shakespearean style. And he's like, a Baltimore cop, black Baltimore cop. And do you remember the episode with the racist character played by Steve Buscemi?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
And like Pemberton, he's like, let me get in there and talk to him. They've got him in the pen or whatever. They've got him in the room. I can't remember what it's called, the interrogation room. And he's like, let me get in there, and they're like, no, no. And he goes in there, and him and Steve Buscemi have this like face off, and he gets to him so much that he finally, does kind of, he implicates himself, and he's really racist, and he implicates himself, and Pemberton's like, he's mad as hell, but he's like, holds himself back, and he's so pleased with himself because he managed to, he didn't lose it. He stayed in there, just stayed on the right side of the line, and he got the man. So he was like a real, like, kind of cult hero at that time. Like, I don't know, me or you or somebody, I remember Nat, we'd talk about, oh, did you watch that? Yeah, he's great, sort of thing. But he didn't feel like he was famous. Now he's famous in a show that I have no intention of watching. Me,
same. He's in Brooklyn Nine-Nine now, like a sitcom that almost feels like, what a waste. I mean, people love it, and I'm sure it's like, and now he's sort of beloved as well. But he's like, a sort of beloved
it's like a
actor.
crap version of the character from the Homicide. But anyway,
I know, but this Frank Pemberton would have been on my list, and of all the cops that are in Homicide: Life on the Street, and all the great cops that are in Homicide: Life on the Streets, it still would have been Frank Pemberton. I didn't pick it for a reason I'll explain later, but I love Frank Pemberton and I love Andre Braugh, and he was such a he is one of those actors that show really introduced me to him. And it's like, who's he? He's got such kind of presence and sort of not so much star quality, because he's definitely a character actor. But like I say, I don't know what his background is. I imagine the same, like he's theatre and proper, like I imagine he's like very good theatre as well. Like I think he's probably like either a New York or Los Angeles actor who's very well known for years and years doing proper serious plays. And then at some point they go, let's get him on the telly. Yeah,
let's make him a cop.
Yeah, if anything, I imagine Brooklyn Nine-Nine now is probably like a retirement fund for him. It's probably like easy job, and he deserves it. He's such an incredible, intense actor, so lovable. Even though the character's got this almost sort of, he's so everything's held back as well.
Yeah, he's almost like on fire, underneath his skin. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
He's like,
oh, I love Frank Pemberton, and the episode where he has a stroke is genuinely one of the most shocking episodes of anything I've ever seen. Absolutely incredible. And just like those shows at that time, this is what I always meant about NYPD Blue. And I think the problem I had with it was that it was kind of on almost like they kind of swap over, wouldn't they, with Homicide for like half the year or something.
Yeah, they did.
You'd have like, you kind of go, oh, well, NYPD Blue's big, so let's get Homicide on as a replacement. And for me, I always felt like NYPD Blue was like the bad one. And I was like, oh no, I want to watch more Homicide. Homicide is the one that I thought it was an incredible show. Absolutely loved it. And I've never, those sort of David Simon shows, like they were stressful to watch.
Yeah.
Totally. And I'd be almost like, I'd be kind of like, and just things like that, episodes like that where he has a stroke, like it's almost like your heart's going.
It's stressful to watch, and you've stayed up late to watch it, right? Because it was on at like 100 o'clock on Channel 4, and so you've stayed up late to watch it, and then after you've watched it, you're like, Jesus, that was stressful. Oh, I can't go to bed now.
Yeah,
so,
I'm up for another couple of hours
like time tracks, what it was called. I'll have to watch some Night Screen just to calm down.
How long did it run for? When did it?
5 years, maybe?
Five series, yeah. Again, though, I think it tails off as it gets on a bit, because it's one of those ones where, like, there's characters, by the end, it's like a lot of the characters are gone, and you're a bit like, yeah. Because, I mean, it had like Yaphet Kotto, as the commander.
Al Giardello.
Fantastic, just to like, it really had everyone in it was cast like for their looks as well. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah,
they were great actors, all of them, but they were totally cast for like, they look like, when you compare them to each other, it's like having sort of cartoon characters because of the difference. It's like this guy's like super tall with huge eyebrows, and then this guy's like absolutely like a mile wide and made of stone, and you know what I mean. They all just like look like real characters.
And Detective Munch from that show is the guy who's responsible for the multiverse. That because he ended up being in The Simpsons playing Detective Munch. He's in Law and Order playing Detective Munch. He's in the X-Files playing Detective Munch. And so they kind of kept, like, it was almost like a joke that they just kept casting him like, oh, why don't we just get the guy from Homicide to play that character in our show? Which kind of created that whole idea that all American TV is a shared universe.
Yeah, he's in The Wire as well, isn't he?
Yeah, The Wire. Yeah, he pops up in The Wire. He pops up, he's Idris Elba as Luther. He's Luther's like American contact.
Wow.
In the States. So even in the UK, he's kind of like, but you kind of feel like in Luther, it's probably done as a joke to be like, oh, we want it to tie it in with those shows. And why wouldn't you? Why wouldn't you? It also automatically makes your show feel a bit better. You go, oh, yeah. I'm actually more interested now if I think it's in the same, if you can call up Munch.
I don't want to miss an episode
Baltimore.
of the Mulchverse.
Yeah.
Didn't he do the voice to Inspector Munch in the Munch Bunch cartoons? Did he do that?
He should do.
He was the whole bunch, actually.
Yeah.
He did all of them.
Yeah, but absolutely, Frank Pemberton, absolutely tacked on. I'd be disappointed if he wasn't somewhere in this list.
Well, number 3. Right. My number 3 is Sledgehammer. Played by David Rash. Is it Rash? Which
I think you pronounce it Rash.
Yeah, Rash. Which was what, 87 to 90, and yeah, I think it used to be on late, right? I think
I remember it being on late night ITV.
Yeah, I didn't know if it was BBC or ITV, but it was definitely one of those late ones. Maybe even like a night network show. But yeah, when I first saw that, I thought it was like, really screwball, out there comedy. But it's weird because only a few years earlier. So it's basically like the guy who wrote it did like a spoof of Dirty Harry. So I think he wrote it in about 76.
Okay.
After Dirty Harry came out, and then he shopped it around. What's the guy's name? Alan Spencer. And I think he shopped it around everywhere trying to pitch this script, and they were all like, nah. And then by the time I think Sudden Impact came out, which was about in the 80s, 83, I think they went, oh yeah, that's a good idea actually. But a bit before I started watching Sledgehammer, I was really into another cop show called Hunter with Fred Dreyer, who was like
I don't know Hunter.
NFL, but he was very much a Dirty Harry ripoff. He was like a TV Dirty Harry, sort of, with a Magnum and everything. So seeing a spoof of it, I just thought it was great. And I have revisited it, and it's not bad. I mean, he's kind of he's an idiot, but he's kind of a likable idiot, and it's really, I think, well acted.
I remember always wanting, like, I rarely got to see it, but it was one of those things that was very attractive to me, Sledgehammer. Like, I've got to try and stay up for Sledgehammer. So it was on like a Saturday night, I think, or a Friday night. So it wasn't like a school night. So it was like plausible, but it was still on late enough where it was a bit like pushing it. Like, it's a bit much, Sledgehammer. But I'm sure at the time, I didn't take it as being a spoof at all. I'm sure I took it deadly seriously. Like, this is, I've got to watch Sledgehammer. It's on late and it's a proper cop show. Marvel Comics released 2 issues of a Sledgehammer comic.
I've read this. So, like, have you seen it? Have you ever seen it?
I think I certainly had them. I don't think I've got them anymore because I was excited that they did these comics. And even at the time, what's weird about it is it only ran for 2 issues, which must give you some idea of like how unpopular it must have been.
But they did in the 80s. Marvel did so much licensed stuff, and it's kind of forgotten. Like, now that it's like, Marvel is an IP in itself. Do you know what I mean? It's a wing of Disney. It's like the Marvel universe. It's like the Marvel published absolutely tons of comics that are nothing to do with the Marvel universe. You know what I mean? They're He-Man comics, and I mean they did all those like video game cash-in ones. Do you know what I mean? Like Double Dragon. It's
Double
like
Dragon,
nothing
yeah,
about playing Double Dragon in the arcade makes you go, "Oh, I'd love to read a comic about this." It's like walking down the street, hitting people with a steel bar. That's it. You know?
I'm pretty sure, I can't think if it's issue 1 or issue 2 of Sledgehammer, Spider-Man guest stars.
Of course.
So it was like, so they're really going, they're really desperate for this thing to take off, but it obviously just didn't at all. But it's rare for anything to have such a short run of comics.
Yeah,
like
you almost can't get the sales data before you can cancel it in that case. Yeah.
It's like it was cancelled before it was ever even released. They were like, pull the plug.
But it just seems a weird one to choose. I know they were doing loads of different properties, but yeah, it's a weird choice.
It is.
Comic.
Yeah, that's a good one now. My number 3 is Dangerous Davis. Dangerous Davis is from, well, he's sort of from two things, really. He's from a TV movie, I think, again, Euston Films, called The Last Detective. And he is played by Bernard Cribbins in the 1981 TV film, The Last Detective. Again, often shows up on Talking Pictures.
Yeah, not long ago, actually.
And it was then later revived, I think in the late 90s, where the character's played by Peter Davison, who is kind of quite well cast. Because what he is, it's probably a sort of update of Gideon's Way or something. Because he's a good cop. He's a nice cop operating out of Willesden. And I've never been to Willesden. It's too far west. But when you see it it's like it's basically suburban West London. And you go, right, it's really, and you get the impression it's quite low crime. And the idea is he's the last detective, as in he is the last person who gets put up for jobs. He's risen to the rank of detective, but no one wants him investigating it because he's not one of the big cops. He's Bernard Cribbins in The Last Detective. So he is, like a kind of Bernard Cribbins. Everyone likes him. He's a nice guy, but he's not the cop people go for. And in it, it's based on a series of books by a guy called Leslie Thomas. And the books and that TV film and the subsequent series later, which I don't really think works as well, but it's trying to do something. It's sort of tacked on as the kind of thing that you could imagine there should have been a series of these with Bernard Cribbins, because it's this thing where it's him doing kind of quite low level police work, but picking up crimes that no one else wants to do, and often they don't want to do them for kind of political reasons within the police, or it's just a case that's gone dead, and he sort of picks them up because it's that thing where he's this sort of good local police detective, because the other detectives are only interested in kind of headlines or there's political things within the police. So he picks up all these crimes. But what's weird about it is it's quite cozy, and a lot of it is he does his detective work by going around like Patsy Rowland's house and having a cup of tea and chatting to her about like what's been going on, and he's sort of piecing it all together. And he's got this friend called Mod, who in the Cribbins one is played by Bill Maynard, who was later Greengrass in Heartbeat. So it's like Bernard Cribbins and Bill Maynard sort of hanging out in pubs, and Bill Maynard's kind of like this old sort of hippie guy who I think sort of like from art school and things. So they're quite sort of mismatched, but they both sort of work together, and they're all kind of, it's always operating in little pubs and him drinking cups of tea and things. But the thing that kind of, and it sort of rubs up against this idea that what he's doing, especially in the first one, he's investigating like a murder of this young girl, and it's got this sort of hard edge to it as well. So it's cozy and it's quite funny, but it's often dealing with these like really dark crimes that no one else will touch. And again, it's this thing where this always has this thing again about police corruption, where it is sort of about these are the guys who are still doing the work and doing their best. And actually, it's that they're the sort of the idea is he's sort of the best copper because he is doing what he's supposed to be doing and what no one else can be bothered to do. And it's him doing this sort of quite low level police work, but he's very much based in the community. And he's going round and he's finding out things from the families and things. And he's picking up these sort of dead cases and things because essentially he hasn't got anything else to do because no one gives him these big cases. So he picks up, and a lot of it is this thing where he's this sort of, he's the sort of little man in the force that everyone's sort of treats as a joke or something. I don't know if like something like A Touch of Frost is like that. That has a sort of cozy-ish element. But this seems to have this real, it's Bernard Cribbins being, a very kind of lovable Bernard Cribbins type. And it's funny, but it's weird that it also has this thing where it's dealing with quite hard crime, and it is still this kind of West London suburb, and he is still going up against all the kind of higher up coppers, and he is dealing with police corruption, and he's really like, he's got this sort of dogged thing where he just doesn't let it lie. He's gonna solve it. And the later ones are kind of, it's a great idea for that kind of ITV show. And again, it's like shot on film, so feels like a movie. And I think it's even like it's the TV film is directed by Val Guest. So it's directed by like a movie director of the 50s and 60s who is now doing TV. But it is still a thing that you could, in theory, you could get it for your cinema. You could have it as a movie, but it is sort of made for ITV, and it feels kind of ITV-ish, like the kind of thing sort of perfect for it because it's quite low level and it's quite cozy, but it does have this sort of very dark edge to it as well. And it's interesting seeing these guys in it who are quite comic actors being funny, but then dealing with really serious crime. And so it has this sort of it, and sometimes it's a bit uncomfortable because it feels like a bit like it feels weird that you're doing this, but actually the tone of it I find quite attractive. I find that the fact it is so on, it feels almost harder, or it feels like it's slightly more disturbing that the people dealing with serious crime is Bernard Cribbins and Bill Maynard. You know what I mean? It has a sort of edge to it that it's them doing it. And the fact they have been these kind of, they spend a lot of it being quite jolly and sort of cuddly and cozy. It also makes it weird that when they're up against proper, like, horrible crime, that it's them doing it. Mm-hmm. So it almost feels a bit more dangerous or a bit more, I don't know, like if it's like, you sort of expect that stuff in shows that are trying to be really hard, and whereas in this, it's this thing where it's like you sort of buy into it more because it's like they're quite nice. He's a nice guy and he's a nice copper, but it's like the world isn't nice, and including the world he operates within the police isn't nice and cozy. But he's still like, he's this thing where it's kind of attractive character because he's so moral. And he's acting this thing where he's doing the job which he thinks is his job more than the job he's told to do. He's like, well, this is what I do, and it's all set in that kind of quite suburban West London. So it feels like it's got it's a bit like that. It sort of feels like it's a little bit cozy, but it's also still West London, and it's not super cozy. I like it a lot.
I didn't know there was a series of it actually, but I stumbled on the film, which I think they retitled Dangerous Davies for the film version. Okay. Yeah. But it's like you say, because it's Bernard Cribbins, you just think, this is like a sort of going to be a funny children's film or something. Yeah. It's going to be good, but that's what you expect. So seeing him play it really straight and at times quite grim situations, it's like you say, it's kind of jarring when you watch it. But I didn't know there was a series of it.
The series came years later. It seems weird. It really feels like you should have just made this, because they sort of make it later. And someone like that, Peter Davison is the Bernard Cribbins character when it comes back. And I guess it's mid to late 90s when they bring it back.
Peter Davison is Doctor Who Peter Davison, yeah?
All Creatures Great and Small.
Yeah.
And he's like, again, he's a very likeable kind of actor, but he's it does lose something, partly as well from not being able to take advantage of those kind of character actors that were around in that sort of early 80s period, where you can imagine how good it could have been if it was all these kind of him visiting all these kind of character actors every week who are part of this plot and things. So it kind of loses something. So it's a shame they didn't kind of go to series at that point. But when you watch it, it's so obviously a great idea for that kind of drama. That almost like that is what I kind of think of as like ITV crime drama, because it is a bit cozy, but it also can be quite grim and quite hard as well. And it feels like the kind of thing that when I watch it, I always go, why didn't they do more of these? It just feels really like a really good idea and really well cast and really, it sort of be like, for me, the kind of, why aren't there 3 or 4 series of this? But maybe it was that. Maybe people found it difficult to get their head around Bernard Cribbins in this kind of, and it's certainly in the first one, it kind of ends with him getting beaten up and things. There's all that kind of stuff happening because he's getting too close to it. And there are these quite, it's this sort of quite cozy world meeting real life crime as well. I like it a lot.
My number 3 is Sergeant Catherine Kaywood. Now, she's not a detective as such, but she does detective work in the shows. Played by Sarah Lancashire on Happy Valley, the Sally Wainwright drama series, which is ongoing. There's another series coming next year, and I think it's phenomenal. She's bringing up her grandson. Her daughter was raped and murdered, and the grandson is the product of that rape, and the killer is the father, and he comes back around in the first series. I think he reappears on the scene, and it's involved, and he's trying to get in touch with the kid, and it's just got some really heavy stuff. But like Sarah Lancashire is Coronation Street actor. And it's that thing with, there's so many people in soaps that are really great actors, and they do soaps for like 30 years, right? And then so few of them then get someone who's a phenomenal writer come and do my serious TV drama, and use your chops and your kind of relatable acting skills, and I think like Sally Wainwright's like taking her on as like, okay, you're the Toshiro Mifune to my Akira Kurosawa, you're gonna be like my actor kind of thing. And it just works so well. It's got so much, like the end of the last series, I think she has all this like ambivalence about, she's brilliant to her grandson, brings up the grandson brilliantly, but she has all this ambivalence to him because of who his dad is, but she still brings him up great, but that's there as a thing. And I think it was the end of the last series. I think there've been 2 series, maybe 3. It's probably made me cry. I just think it's a fantastic thing, and it's also like really gripping crime drama with proper like desperation policing and police work, and like we've got to bend the rules here, got to do it not how you're supposed to do it, and it's fantastic. And it's all set in, it's not Huddersfield, it's not Halifax, it's another town somewhere around there in Yorkshire, and it's just like totally local show, like you're talking about Willesden in the other one. It's like I love shows which just totally inhabit a local place. And so like when you watch a series of the show, you're like, I kind of know that place now. Like that's that road that goes down to there, and then there's the shops, the police station's there. If you're driving out of town, there's that road there that goes up to that other character who's up there, and you get that real sense of it. And I really like that, and I think it's really nice to have a kind of just an older woman cop who is not glamorous, you know what I mean? She's not Helen Mirren, you know what I mean? This is very much like, I'm a northern policewoman, and I don't take any crap, and I'm absolutely kind of a single parent, and I'm absolutely gonna get this case done and look after my alcoholic sister, all while you know, all while being pretty stressed myself and having my own, like, it's just top notch, stressy northern drama.
I'm glad you mentioned it actually, because it feels like something I've been meaning to watch for so long, and I'm glad it's popped back into my sphere of things. Where I was just going, oh yeah, I'm going to watch this. I keep meaning to watch that. I always forget about it. And also, I mentioned someone this afternoon that I was doing this, and they immediately said, "Oh yeah, Happy Valley." And I went, "Haven't seen it," and it made me go, "Oh yeah, I really got to get on this." That it is obviously just one of these things where people immediately go for that as their That's
top.
TV
I think
Cops,
of recent stuff, it's really top. And that Sally Wainwright does loads of stuff that's really funny. You know, she can do funny. She's done funny TV Cops. You know, she can do that as well. But this isn't really funny at all. But it's really good. And it's a cut above a lot of the other. There's been much bigger crime shows. You know, kind of British crime drama, kind of ITV, your Broadchurches and things and stuff. This is way better than that. It's much better than that. It's top notch.
I'll get on that, I think.
And there's a new series coming out next year, so I just checked that today.
My number 2, it's a bit pedestrian, but it was always going to be on my list, and it's ended up quite high up, and it's Dave Starsky from Starsky and Hutch. But yeah, it's just probably the most classic 70s cop show? Definitely when I was a kid, it seemed to be, Starsky and Hutch seemed to be like spoofed on everything, on like Morecambe and Wise, the two Ronnies, Benny Hill maybe, I don't know. Yeah. It was so iconic and everything. But the character is a good character. It's sort of, everyone seems to be the favourite out of the two, Starsky and Hutch. And I don't know if it's maybe he's the one who's, I don't know, eating some manky hot dogs from a stand, whereas Hutch is sort of doing his own health food or something. Something that when they made the film, the Ben Stiller film, they kind of reversed that, didn't they?
Oh, I didn't see that. They reversed that.
Yeah, but I think that's probably to fit in with their usual on-screen personas. So Owen Wilson couldn't be the sort of straight-laced one. So they sort of reversed it. But yeah, no, I think one of the big things for me when I was a kid was seeing a program where the main character wore trainers. Because especially cops, they always wore shoes.
Yeah.
And if you're like 6 or 7 or 8, you kind of you sort of like, you think they're cool, but you always go, oh, look at their shoes though.
Yeah, rubbish.
But he had like proper trainers on, you know, sneakers, kicks, crepes, whatever. But yeah, so he was quite, to a young kid at the time, he was quite dapper in a way and cool. But also just the music of the show. There's loads of funky incidental music that's just really great.
And when people would spoof it, they'd spoof the music as well. Do you know what I mean? They'd have some bass line going and some, you know, drumming on it and stuff. And
I mainly just remember spoofs of like the opening title sequences mainly. But yeah, I just used to love it, and it was that sort of thing. Everyone would be playing Starsky and Hutch in the playground, and everyone would want to be Starsky as well.
So you'd be playing Starsky and Starsky and Starsky and Starsky and Starsky.
Yeah.
So I'm not like, it's one of those shows that I'm kind of familiar with, but like I've hardly ever watched it, I think. Have you watched it recently? Is it something that's held up?
It's held up for what it is. And it's weird because was there about 4 or 5 seasons of it? And it starts off, I think as it went on, I think Paul Michael Glaser and David Soul, I'm sure they started wanting to direct and write, maybe not write, but definitely direct more of it. And it changes as it gets later. So certainly the first few seasons feel different to the later ones. But it is kind of, was it like the first sort of like buddy cop type thing, wasn't it really?
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of, some of the stories are quite gritty and stuff, but there are some silly stories in there.
Yeah. I don't think I grasped, for an American import show, I don't think I grasped just how popular it was in the UK in the 70s. I remember reading somewhere like it is like one of the most popular TV shows of the 70s in the UK. Like it was a proper, I think it was like Saturday night or something, and it was like 9 o'clock or something. It was real prime time show. But it's sort of funny now that I know it almost more from people spoofing it than I know the show itself.
It was like it's just even so growing up in the 80s, it was like if you were going to call somebody some cops, you'd be like, oh, look over there, it's Starsky and Hutch. You know what I mean? It was like if you're going to name two cops, name two cops, Starsky and Hutch. You know what I mean? It was like the ubiquitous. You know what I mean?
It was huge.
Yeah.
I remember everyone used in the, like, obviously it was early 80s, late 70s, but used to get them really like horrible sort of flammable t-shirts with a print on the front. They were always like white or navy blue, and they had a full front print, and they were quite sort of skinny fitting, but you always got like Batman, Spider-Man, and the other one was Starsky and Hutch. Big photo print front.
Yeah, I reckon you could buy like I bet you could get like even a duvet cover or something.
Yeah, probably.
And I think you got like Matchbox cars and things. You'd kind of see sort of secondhand in.
Yeah, definitely.
At that time, you would get that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
and Antonio Fargas as well, who is kind of in like almost every blaxploitation film as Huggy Bear as well. And that's kind of an interesting idea of having a character who's like an informer as well.
Oh my God, he was so famous as a character.
Yeah.
Like that's another thing. It's like he's not even in every episode or anything, is he?
I don't think he is. Did he not just become like so popular that I'm sure he moved up in the credit sequence?
Yeah, I guess that's it. I think he starts out as just like a character in one episode or something, and then it's like he was so famous. He could come into the UK and be like, "I'm going on Parkinson," and he'd be like, "You don't even in anything. You haven't even done anything for 10 years." It'd be like 1992 to still be going on Parkinson or something.
Yeah, and certainly even in the 90s, he'd be on stuff like The Word. It'd be like, "Oh, you've got Antonio Fargas on Huggy Bear." It'd be like,
actually,
"Oh yeah." I mean, like it's like, wow, this is from a different era, though.
Yeah,
right?
but it's that thing, like you said, it being iconic. It's like that kind of thing. It's like it's just iconic, so it doesn't matter.
And it must have been pretty much on repeat to this day, on and off.
I reckon it would have been repeat on the normal channels until the cable and stuff kicked in. Then it would switch over to them. And
Dave Starsky.
It's a good name as well. So just to point that out, Dave Starsky is a top name. Like you've got two ways to go with police. I think when you're naming them on TV is to go like, Johnny Normal, like a really basic name, or you go something nuts. You know what I mean? Like Sledgehammer. You know what I mean? Like the spoof ones are the same as the proper ones or something.
Did Lovebug Starsky? Did he come? He must have come after Dave Starsky, right?
Yeah, Lovebug Starsky, and what was the other?
There is another
Busy Bee Starsky.
Busy Bee.
Busy Bee. So two rappers named themselves after Starsky. So definitely that kind of, I think that for that early hip hop generation, it was very much like a big influence of like, this is a cool guy.
My number 2 is Columbo. It's one of those ones where it feels kind of like he'll be in the list, but where he'd land, I wasn't sure. But he is like, it's one of those sort of perfect kind of police detective shows, really. And the fact it is this sort of, it's not a whodunit. You see the murderer. Columbo doesn't even usually show up till like half an hour in after you see the whole crime take place. Columbo shows up and he's like, I presume, and the guy, you see the murder, you see the murderer, you know who it is, and Columbo comes in and has to solve it.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that shouldn't work, but is always really kind of gripping. And the idea that he is this kind of, the murderer will always be a big guest star, whether it be Patrick McGowan or Johnny Cash or Robert Culp or whoever it is that week comes in. and they're a big star. And I guess they do it as well, because they're sort of the main character that week, because they're going to have more screen time than Columbo. Columbo's going to come in halfway through. And what I didn't know is Peter Falk, Columbo, apparently he would know his lines, but he'd basically improvise everything and would do things like when he comes out, he'd apparently have like a, you know, and the other actors wouldn't know what he was going to do. So instead of doing the lines, Peter Falk would like pull out his shopping list and read what he needs at the groceries or whatever. And he'd have the actors a bit like, because they wanted to react to him like he is this kind of like, this guy's crazy. Who is this guy? Who is this little, you know, this little police detective who, and the idea is he's a kind of working class police detective. He wears an old Mac and he's often operating in this kind of big money world where there's some high crime going on, and he kind of wanders in, solves it all. But of course, by acting, spending most of it essentially being a pal to the murderer and acting like, well, of course, you've got nothing to do with this. But he's on him from the start, and he always gets to leave, and he gets to go, oh, just one more thing, and unravel the whole thing. Love it. So satisfying every week, even though it's the same show every week. The same thing happens every week, but it's always very satisfying.
What's his first name?
Well, apparently they don't mention it in the show, but apparently on some times when you see it like written down, apparently it says Frank Columbo.
Yeah, Frank.
You never really know it's never mentioned in the show, but apparently if you see like paperwork and things, it says Frank Columbo.
Okay. Sorry.
Oh no, go on. Yeah.
No, I was going. He was really nearly did make my list, but he didn't make it in the end. But I do love the show, but I didn't know if it was more to do. I didn't know if it was not so much the character of Columbo that I liked, as in the whole show. And it, like you say, it very much is about who that guest star is. If it's like William Shatner or whoever, it's like their chance to really, like, they can really sort of pull out all their big acting guns.
Yeah.
And it's totally, like you say, they are the main star of that episode. And Columbo just sort of like feeds into that. So
in some ways it's a thankless task in a way, but I think it's kind of clever with that show that he is such a kind of character. And I think that's because it's Peter Falk. And you kind of get the impression, I assume that's what Peter Falk's like. I assume he's Columbo. And that's his like day-to-day life. But I think he's got such charisma as this man who's almost trying not to have charisma. He's almost trying to blend into the background and just be this normal guy. But yeah, I think it's a great show. I do particularly like Columbo. I like all that stuff where, you know, he talks about his wife all the time. You never see his wife. I found out today as well that because Peter Falk was, you know, he's in all the Cassavetes movies and things, and they were like, well, is he going to be able to do this? We're going to be able to have this as like a weekly show, however many weeks a year. And they were like, I don't think Peter Falk's going to do it because he's like a film actor. And so they, and not because he wouldn't do TV, it was more that he wouldn't want to work at that TV schedule. So like they negotiated that Columbo was on telly monthly. Well, incredible, like just because like nothing else had that schedule. So they'd release it, you'd have one episode a month. And I guess that makes it even more special when they were coming on. That it just was like, so each episode, I guess, ended up being a bit of an event. Because I guess people were going, is it Columbo this week? It's like, nah, not this week. It, probably like that 3 weeks out of 4. Was it Columbo? No, it was a Columbo last week, so it's not on this week. I love the idea that and just because they made, and it pushed the quality up, and that's why you had like Spielberg and people direct episodes of Columbo, because it was like, it was much more like a movie schedule, yeah. And you could do this kind of, even though it was him on the rise, you know, but it was still, you know, you'd still get kind of big directors to do it. And just like, you know, great guest stars. And I guess if you were doing that show, you were essentially like, you could get anyone because you're sort of the star of the show and you're in a big event TV thing. And it must be like must have become like oh man, I want to do a Columbo. I want to be.
Is there? Because I'm definitely more of a fan of the 70s ones. Are there any great, like in the 90s ones? Are there any great, really 90s stars as the villain?
Well, there's like later on they've got like Billy Connolly.
Right, that's
one. So it's got like, you know, it has a bit like you have odd ones like that. But a lot of it was part of the thing when they started doing the revivals was part of it was kind of getting 70s actors back and just have him a bit older and go like, let's have them back as just a different murderer. So it still has a sort of feel of being like the 70s show, but it isn't. You do notice it. Like you say, it doesn't feel as good. But I mean, essentially, it's one of those things where you couldn't really put your finger on what's different about it because it's still exactly the same show.
Growing up, I must have watched a lot of Columbo. Like I feel like it was on in the daytime all the time. So it would be one of those things that would just be on. But it was because, like you said, like Columbo often actually turn up till the end of the episode or something. You'd have it on. You'd go, if you missed the opening credits, you'd be like, I don't even know what this is. Like, you know what I mean? I don't even know what I'm watching. You know, it's some crime, but I don't even know what it is. You know, and then either was it on ITV?
Yeah, it was on ITV for a long time.
So I remember being on. You'd have to go to an ad break to find out what it was,
right?
Unless Columbo turned up, you know.
Yeah, I remember as a kid not really like. I guess it was just like a lot of those things where you just go, it's like a grown-up show. I'm not interested in this. And I think I was probably in my teens or something when I kind of just caught one, kind of on the off chance. And everything about it's really well made. They feel like they're. It feels like a film. It's really well shot. It's all like. And then immediately you go, oh God, these are so kind of charming and so like totally buy into it, and they're very watchable. And also they're one of those things where like you do sometimes see those things at those time of DVD box sets where you go, oh man, I could get the complete Columbo. But it is one of those things where I like coming across it more, and it's like I don't think I want to get to the end of Columbo. I don't want to sit down and do all the Columbos and then go, got no more Columbos to watch. I mean, pretty much, if one comes on, I do go, seen it. It's this one.
So you must be quite high up. You should get a checklist. Check them off.
But I bet there's some I haven't seen. I'm sure a lot of the new ones I haven't seen either. But yeah, I think it's a great show.
My number 2 is, I'm doing all the recent ones, is Detective William Morland of The Wire. Bunk. Played by Wendell Pierce. And I love The Wire. I thought The Wire was fantastic. It's full of great police. Lester Freeman, Kima Greggs, Jimmy McNulty, great police. But Bunk's the over the course of all the series, Bunk is the hero one to me. He's just, they never overdo him. You know what I mean? They well, maybe they do a couple of times, but they basically like, absolutely, they don't overwrite him. So most of his best stuff is just looks that he gives people, probably McNulty, but just general kind of, you're all idiots, this is all stupid looks. And I think he's the only, because a good thing about The Wire is that the characters are all very flawed. You know, nobody's like a great hero. I think he's the nearest you get to like a kind of, that's a hero character. And this is a slobby, lazy policeman who only does the good stuff kind of when he's like, all right, we'll do it. And so it's great to have him as a kind of real hero character.
He's good police for sure.
Natural police.
I don't know what rank he is. My number 1 is Theodore Kojak from Kojak, as played by Telly Savalas in the original series, because it's been redone since. But I think
they did do a remake, didn't they?
Yeah.
I didn't watch it. Ving Rhames was it? As
Kojak? Yeah. It might have been great, but I didn't actually see it. And I don't know. He's so like just one of those characters that is Kojak. It is Telly Savalas.
Hmm.
Very hard
And
to shift that out of your mind and be like, oh, this is also Kojak. No.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it was like 1973 to 78. But it's one of those shows that it just reminds me of being like just going to bed and that music starting, and it would be something that my dad would watch because it was sort of, no, this is like a serious, gritty cop show. And he kind of he probably wouldn't watch Starsky and Hutch.
Right.
But Kojak was a bit more serious. Then he's not sort of mucking about, like Starsky and Hutch. This is more of a serious show. But yeah, music's great, the theme tune. But yeah, Telly Savalas is brilliant. I can't believe that Stavros is George Savalas, his brother, who doesn't look anything like him because he's got a massive mop of curly hair.
To be fair, not many people look much like Telly Savalas.
Yeah.
I guess it was rare at the time because they really make a virtue of the idea that he's kind of Greek American, right? He's this, like, it's part of it.
Yeah, I think originally I think it was written as the guy had a Polish heritage, but I think when they cast Telly Savalas, I think they just used his Greek background.
But they kept the name Kojak.
Yeah, but they kept the name Kojak, which doesn't sound Greek.
Doesn't sound Greek.
No, you're right.
Does sound
and
Polish.
I think it wasn't quite Polish either, but but anyway, they kind of brought that quite a lot into it.
He's such an odd star, Telly Savalas. I really like seeing him in film. To me, I always just assume that like Kojak was like this first thing, but then you sort of realize later on he's got this sort of movie career in the kind of late 60s, early 70s, kind of pre-Kojak, where he's like very charismatic villains and things.
Yeah, because in the sort of when did he do? See, in the Dirty Dozen.
Yeah, he's in the Dirty Dozen. That's early 70s, and he's in lots of kind of Italian movies and lots of European movies in that kind of very early 70s. He's the big villain in On Her Majesty's Secret Service as well. So he's Blofeld in one of the James Bond films. And this is all before Kojak. And in my head, I always just assume that was after. Like you kind of, it's only when you look at it, you go like, oh no, he has like a movie career before he's ever, he does TV later, like a lot of film stars do.
Yeah, I definitely knew him first from Kojak, and I realised he had all these other films behind him after. But yeah, he's weird because he's just one of those. There's not many sort of like big, iconic bald actors. There's like, two that I can think of off the top of my head. Him and like Yul Brynner.
Yeah.
But yeah, he's an unlikely looking sort of New York cop, you'd think. But I think the whole show is like, it's really got that feeling of, it's all sort of quite nicely shot, and it's all in like downtown Manhattan or whatever. So it really has that sort of 70s New York gritty feeling to it. Yeah. I really like it. It's still like, watching it back, it's not like my memories are not sort of just tinged by nostalgia. It is like, I think it is a good show, and there's good dialogue. Yeah, there's not much action. There's a lot of scenes where they've caught the guy, the crook, and then he just sort of falls down a big mound or a side of an embankment, and Kojak just sort of still with his hands in his pockets, just sort of arrests him when he lands at the bottom. There's a lot of that. You don't see him running about too much, but yeah, it's more about the all the other stuff.
Yeah, tremendously charismatic actor, and also weird. He would have had like a recording career, I guess, around that time as well.
Yeah, I don't know if would have spun off of the popularity of that series. I reckon that's what he's
done. Yeah. But you do that, like, I mean, he came up in our top 5 Daves. But like Edward Woodward, when he was Callan, was also bringing out records. Because I guess you just sort of have this opportunity. You say, "Oh, do you want to do a record? You're on telly." It's like, sure. I guess these opportunities just come.
I think if you're in the second half of the 60s or first half of the 70s, you could easily just tack a music career onto almost any high profile life. You'd be like, "Do you want to record an album?" Someone from some label would come and be like, "Do you want to record an album?" because I reckon we can sell that. You know, they're like, yeah, why not? I've always fancied myself as a singer. You know, like
now it's the domain of Bradley Walsh, isn't it? He can do it. He did an album a couple of years ago, and I think Alexander Armstrong does albums that they sell
Does he?
to.
Really?
They sell them to Nans at Christmas, I think.
Alexander Armstrong does albums.
What
Yeah,
is
he
it
does
like?
albums.
Sort of like Michael
He had like
Bublé.
a number one album or something. I think so. Yeah, I presume that's what it's like.
Oh, I didn't need to know that.
And what about Bradley Walsh?
He does one that's all like swing Sinatra type things.
Oh,
You know,
yeah.
that kind of
Yeah.
that caper. Of course he does. Of course he does. That's the world we're living in now. Telly Savalas one time, and now it's Bradley Walsh doing his recording contract. But yeah, that's a great one. Great detective. And again, I would have imagined you would have popped a Kojak in at some point. Although I've totally forgotten. You hadn't been on your list already.
But I think like a bit like Starsky and Hutch in that thing is like it was iconic for decades afterwards. So do you know what I mean? Like again, you just say like, oh, someone figures something out, you'd be like, all right, Kojak. You know what I mean? Like like
anyone who's bald is Kojak.
Anyone who's bald is Kojak. Yeah.
Perhaps still.
Yeah. Is that your real hair or you Kojak, sis? Do you remember that from what's that from? Cash Money and Marvelous.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Is it all the ugly people be quiet?
No, is it real?
Is it real? Okay. Good. Nat, you do your one next. I know I'll do my one next because you guys won't have watched it, so it won't be a great ending.
I don't know.
My number one is Sorganoran Landsgrim Malmor. Sorganoran from the bridge, or Bron in its original Danish/Swedish, because it's it's about the bridge between Malmo and Copenhagen. But Sorganoran comes from the Swedish side, from the Malmo police. She has to go and work with someone from the Copenhagen police to solve a crime which happens on the bridge. So it's like both jurisdictions, it's a big bridge. And she's like this kind of absolutely, I won't say passionate, she has absolute conviction, right? I think they've said she's kind of got Asperger's. She's very much like totally straight speaking, like abrupt, frank, says outrageous things, thinks nothing of it. And she gets paired with this really lovely guy, Martin Rode, from the Danish side of the bridge. And they have to solve these murders, and they have these very different techniques. He's got a lot of empathy and a lot of understanding, and she doesn't understand anyone at all, and it's all sort of robotic, and everything's obvious kind of thing, like what, no? But she's a top detective. And in later series she's paired up with a guy called Henrik instead, and you think, oh, he can't replace Martin, he's not as good, and he's great. He's great too, but she's the absolute. I mean, this is my favorite TV show of the last 20 years or so. I think it's the best. It's incredible. It's a really good like whodunit. Every series is a really good whodunit detective show, and the characters of the police characters, whether they're ones that you like or ones that you don't like, that they have to work with and stuff. And there's a lot of bent police and dodgy people with big egos trying to advance their career and that kind of thing that they come across, and all the characters are so phenomenal, and the interactions between them, the way people talk, the relationship, the romantic relationships that happen, things, all just incredible. And you have this like completely unusual character at the center of it, this woman who is she is the brain, she is the one who gets it all done. And yes, she kind of needs a nice man to translate for her, and she's the tough one. Like, she will shoot someone. If suspect's running away, she's going to shoot them, and she's not going to miss because she's like almost a Terminator, But she is just this phenomenal, unusual character, and she drives a green Porsche 911, which you eventually find out why the hell she drives a green Porsche 911 in, I think, the last series, won't do any spoilers there for anyone, but it's just like a phenomenal little detail. I reckon it's just that originally it must have just been like the props person was like, I can buy this Porsche. It's like old Porsche. It's like 80s Porsche. I could buy that for the show. And someone's gone, yeah, do it. You know, that's what it feels like. And but just like a super character, and it's a show with an ending as well. Like it's 2011 to 2018, right? But the ending, it has an ending. You know, like the thing I hate most about TV shows that are successful now is they just keep doing them until everyone stops watching, and then no one knows if they had an ending because no one cared by that point. So I really like a show with an actual ending. Like they're like, no, we've written the end. That's the end.
How many series did they do?
I want to say 4, maybe 5.
Okay, that's pretty good over 6 years or something.
Oh, it's top. It's top. And there was some long waits because obviously being translated into English sort of thing, you know, doing the subtitles, it took a while to get them all out, and you know, you'd be waiting a long time for them, but absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. And she's just this a really phenomenal character, and for that actor to play her and go like, yeah, you're playing a kind of Asperger's super cop who cannot do any normal social interaction at all, right? But is an amazing cop. That's not something you get to play every day, you know. The thing is, like, you know, where she's like, there's this thing where she's whenever she answers the phone, she says "Sognoin, let's go Malmo," like she all the time. And when she meets anybody, "Sognoin, let's go Malmo," and everyone's like, "Hi," like, you know, I'm Dave, whatever, you know, like she's like this kind of robotic delivery of everything. And then, but then like there's bits where she'll just say to somebody, "Sexo," you know, be like a character, and she'll be like, you know, "Do you want to have sex?" And they're like, "What? What do you mean?" Like she's like, "Well, I need to have sex sometimes. Do you want to?" And they're like, "Oh, yeah, I guess." She's like, "Okay, take off your clothes." You know, it's this kind of thing, and they're all just like, "What the hell's going on?" You know, like the interactions she has with people are just baffling to them. But you really get to know her internal logic and her kind of how she sees the world and how she experiences the world, and it's like a really unusual trip to go down as a viewer.
Yeah, I never
Sounds
really
good.
I
would definitely watch it.
When it comes back on,
search it out.
If you see it on the, I don't know, on the Scandinavian channels, top notch.
I never really got into any of the Scandinavian Java things. But like it's that thing where they seem to start, and then there was almost like immediately about 8 different ones. And I was going, this is the new good one. You go, it's too much already. It's too.
I watched a bunch of them, but it's the only one where I'd be like, oh, that's on another level. Like The Killing or something turned into pure trash. And it wasn't a detective show. It was just one of those shows where somebody blunders around and accidentally solves a crime. That it's like infuriating to watch, where you're like, don't do that, don't do that, don't do that. And at the end, it's like, yeah, you solved the crime, but you could have done it like 10 episodes ago if you hadn't just messed everything up. Whereas, yeah, that's not what The Bridge is like. But yeah, like, it's phenomenal. It's definitely, when all those other shows have disappeared into the distance, it's the one that people go back to. Love it.
My number 1 is Lester Freeman from The Wire. Interesting, very interesting that The Wire's come up. To me, it's interesting because to me, he's definitely not the main character, but for me, it feels like that series is waiting for him before he comes on it, and it's this. In the first series, before the character's introduced, you have a few episodes, I think, without him.
Is he in the first series at all?
Yeah, he's in the first series.
Yeah, okay.
But I think it's like I think he comes in about halfway through. He's played by Clark Peters, who I kind of recognise because he's one of those actors who, for years, I assumed was English because in the 80s he's in loads of English things, and I guess he's just over here doing theatre for a while or whatever. And they kind of talk him up. They talk about this character, and he's this sort of great detective. And they kind of, when they're assembling their team to bring down Avon Barksdale, they're kind of talking about Lester Freeman. You see, you have this, he sort of has this, what's the word? Like a kind of allure about him before you find out who this
He's got
character
an aura. You hear
aura.
like he's got like a bit of a legend about him.
And they find him, and because he's kind of again, because he's good police. He's I think there's someone like a fence or something that he's sent down, but it's like a political thing where he was told not to bring this guy in, so he's then been put in like what's called like the pawn shop, which is essentially just looking after all the evidence room kind of stuff, where he sits there making dolls' houses that he supplements his income with.
Yeah, doll's house furniture, whittling doll's house furniture.
And it's like when he turns up, they kind of introduce this character who is like the Sherlock Holmes of the Wire universe, who is like by far like famous in the police department for being like the best detective they've got, but who is being completely underused. And they bring him out, and he's such this kind of. It does feel like when he turned up, I remember going, "This is what this show needs. This is who I've been waiting for." And you just bring on this kind of like almost like super detective to do all the kind of and it's that sort of methodical work, and it's him just going through like phone bills and things because he's like it's that kind of taking away all the kind of, you know, who could it be? All right, well, we've got this huge job to do, so I'm methodically going to go through phone bills. And again, I think in the second and third series, I think that's when they team him up with Bunk. So then you've got Bunk and Lester Fremont, who are both kind of sort of opposites, but they're the kind of partnered together when he then becomes like just one of the team from that point onwards. But I remember like in that first series, almost like, yeah, this is exactly what we need. And it felt that you kind of knew the character before he came in. And I was totally sold on it. When he turned up, it was just like, this guy's my favorite. This guy's my favorite on a show which is full of great police, because it just sort of throws in, like, I think David Simon does that quite often. He sort of throws in, it's like a sort of curveball, like they bring in the kind of archetype character who shouldn't really exist in the Wire universe. And to me, it is like they've gone, it's like a show, you know, about different levels of how drugs are affecting society in this Baltimore town from the bottom up. And it's kind of like a really clever show, and they've got all these police who are really ground level police, and they might as well have said, I'll tell you who we need on the team, Sherlock Holmes, because they basically bring in this character who's basically almost like Sherlock Holmes level, and he's kind of intellect,
he's older than the others, and he
brilliant.
wears like cardigans and stuff. Do you know what I mean? He's not. But that's why. So I have one problem with Lester Freeman, right? It's like, so he's wearing like funny like granddad cardigans, and he's got grey in his beard, and he sits in the office, you know, on his desk doing the methodical police work sort of thing, and it's very good. But why does he ends up like marrying the woman who's like a stripper that they interview in the first series, and she's like, I don't know, she's like 22 and she's beautiful, and she's like just marries him because he's such a good guy or something, and then he's like, yeah, get a woman, you know, kind of thing. And it's I find that bit a bit like this is silly to throw in, but yeah. I
think the idea is, I don't know, I always get the idea he's kind of like they bring in like a genius to figure it all out. I kind of love that, where I don't know, I just think he's sort of quite a big character. Not that other characters in it aren't big, but almost a slightly kind of unbelievable way out figure comes in, and it kind of almost shouldn't work. But the way he's kind of talked up and the reveal of him, I remember just being totally, I mean, maybe it was just at that point, I'm so kind of suckered into the series that it's just like brilliant. I love it.
This is the second character, though, that you described, where they're like the overlooked policeman who's actually doing great work.
Yeah.
Is that how you see yourself in the police force of life?
In the police force of life?
Overlooked kind of guy plugging away at being good police, but not being properly recognised by the other police.
Well, probably. Well, you're our second guest we've ever had on, but the only other guest we've had on is Hayley Campbell. And while working together in a comic book shop, we both referred to each other as good police, because we'd be able to triangulate customers who had maybe dumped comics work out who it was who'd done
Dumped
some
comics, by the way,
crime.
for those listening at home, dumped comics means you've picked up some comics while you're walking around the shop and then you decided you didn't want them, so you've put them down in the wrong place.
Wrong place, wrong
right?
place.
This can go with any product in any retail environment, just for the record.
But for us, it was important to find out who's done this. Who's done this? So that we knew when they came in again that they were criminals.
Comics shop criminals.
So just you'd be like, oh, okay, right, it's interesting. It's interesting that you turned out to be a criminal. And that was the level of police work that we were doing at the time.
It's good retail. Will you still, to this day, like return things to the correct aisle in the supermarket if you see them like in the wrong bit? Oh, someone's left sausages in amongst the like kids' magazines.
Well, I'm always worried when it's fridge items because I always go, well, how long's it been there?
Yeah,
of course.
Yeah.
What about freezer items?
Oh,
Well,
they're goners. They're goners, man. Even if someone decides at the till they don't want it, the freezer items at my Tesco, they will either walk them straight back to the freezer or they just sling them. They're just like, forget it, it's dead. Don't try and revive it. We've lost him. You know.
That's one of the things in supermarkets now. I'm slightly when people do that kind of, I don't want this anymore. Can I just leave that here? And of course I go, of course you can. But I'm always like,
no.
If that was me, I'd have taken it back before I got here.
100%, man. I will walk down 10 aisles to put something back in the right place.
Me too.
Before I go.
Me too.
If you've worked in retail, you're just not going to be doing that.
Of course not. Of course not. So that's why I would say, yeah, I am overlooked good police. Although technically not overlooked because the only true police there were me and Hayley Campbell. We both kind of gave each other the good police nods to go, that's good police work, to work out who that was.
I knew a detective for a while, and I was just like, tell me about your work. And he just couldn't talk about it in any interesting way. And I was like, no, but that's really interesting. And he was like, yeah, no, it is. And then he'd just be incredibly boring about it. And I found that really disappointing. Like, oh God, no wonder it takes like top writers to write, detective shows. I don't think many detectives become good detective writers. I think, it's...
Yeah, maybe it's probably one of those jobs that you'd really want to do, but if you did it, you'd be like, this isn't what I signed up for.
I don't think I'd be cut out for it. Hurk, you think you could be a detective?
No, not at all. No, I'm not cut out for it either.
Also, I think I'd have
rubbish.
to. I don't think I'd be police detective. I think I'd have to go sleuth.
Private eye.
Yeah, because then you could come up with a thing, right? A look and you'd have to come up with like an eccentricity that you could turn up places, like a monocle or something. Yeah, that's what you'd want to do it that way.
You don't have to fit in with something else. You can just.
You'd go
create
cravat,
your own.
You go cravat. That would be your thing, wouldn't it?
Something that you'd have to do some. You'd have to dress some weird. It could be anything. It could be that I start wearing chains and gold chains or something. You'd want something. Essentially, if you're an amateur sleuth, you'd look like someone who presented Bargain Hunt or one of those things, showing up somewhere. You'd want to be like someone like those Bargain Hunt guys. They're like the kind of closest thing we've got to people who turn up to solve a crime. If one of those guys turned up at a murder, I'd be like, oh yeah, cool. Let's get this guy involved.
Crossed with Lovejoy. That's what you're saying, basically.
Exactly,
something between the two.
Yeah. And then that's who, like, if you're looking around, you'd be like, that's who can solve this. Let's get them involved in.
Like if you just got crimed in the street, you were crimed in the street, and you looked around and you saw like David Dickerson, you'd be like,
exactly,
help! I've been crimed.
Yeah, he'd be the guy who could sort it out, I reckon. Any other good detectives that didn't make the grade?
I just one iconic looking one who wasn't on a particularly good TV show and wasn't a particularly good cop, but boy was he iconic growing up, was DC Alfred Lyons. Do you know who that is?
Tosh Lyons.
Tosh Lyons, of course.
He was on my honourable mentions as well.
Because he's not that great, but boy did he have a great moustache and just general look. Like that was like he was a singular human being on the telly at that time.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
not many people look like that.
I've
and
seen
Burnside from the Bill as well.
Burnside.
DCI Burnside.
There's quite a few of those Bill ones, I guess, but yeah, they're just more sort of Bobbies, aren't they? Certainly at points. Who else did I have? You got Crockett and Tubbs, Miami Vice. Another very watchable show when you see it. It's a good show. Frank Pemberton would have been on my, and that's why I didn't have him, because I didn't want to. I thought I can't have 2 David Simon cops on my list, so I had to.
Fair enough.
I had to sacrifice him. One that comes up on Talking Pictures is Gentle Touch, Maggie Forbes,
Jill Gascoigne.
Jill Gascoigne, yeah. Later Cat's Eyes. The first series I really liked of Broadchurch. It kind of lost its way, but Olivia Colman, Ellie Miller is that,
great.
And in that way where you kind of, the David Tennant cop is very kind of trad, ITV cop, and they sort of, Ellie Miller's the one who gets to do stuff and gets to do the proper character stuff and has proper arc, whereas David Tennant's basically the same guy all the way through. He's kind of one note. He's good in it, but he's like kind of one note. Yeah,
you're very right. We've seen that Policeman. I think that's an interesting thing with more female lead cop shows coming out now than there used to be. That you get to see characters you haven't seen before, whereas we have seen an awful lot of male cops before because there's been so many cop shows for so many decades. And one of my favourites is John Solway, who is the character in Our Friends in the North, who heads up the like bent CID who are like shaking down Soho in the late 60s, and he's a terrifying cop played by David Schofield, and just really seedy and like, you know what I mean, the worst of cops, the absolute worst of cops.
A lot of time for David Schofield. On Our Friends in the North, I kind of wanted to have Fitz from Cracker, but he's criminal psychologist rather than detective, and I guess if I was going to have a detective, it would be David Bibra, who is Chris Eccleston, R.I.P. Not Chris Eccleston, David Bibra in Cracker. Chris Eccleston is still with us, but a great cop. But in a way, you kind of want to have Fitz rather than Bibra.
You got any more?
I had Frank Drebin on my list, but I thought I couldn't have 2 sort of comedy ones on my list, so he just gets an honourable mention. I did have Columbo on my honourable mentions, and a couple of cartoon ones, which is the Inspector from the Pink Panther cartoon series, which is basically, Inspector Clouseau, based on Peter Sellers. But I just really love the way that's drawn.
Yeah,
and fantastic. It is almost better than the Pink Panther cartoons, the Inspector bits.
Yeah.
And the other one was PC Copper from a show called Bod.
Yeah.
And Cagney and Lacey as well. Was it Mary Beth? Lacey was quite a good character, because that was the character that was more like, oh, this is my home life as well. And what it's like being a mum as well as being a cop at the same time.
I thought of Officer Dibble from Top Cat, but then I realised I don't really like Officer Dibble.
No.
I like Top Cat.
It's a dickhead.
I like Top Cat.
Another recent one is I don't know if you watched any of this. I don't know if you watched The Missing, but is Julien Baptiste. I've forgotten the actor's name, but he's a French Turkish actor and musician, like a jazz musician and singer, and like, my God, has he got charisma to burn? Like, and he's doing this, it's a British show, but he's a French detective who's kind of, he's talking like Arsene Wenger, he's like got a fantastic sort of French for English people accent, oh, we must investigate this crime. It's very important, and it's fantastic. It's a bit slightly trashy show, and then he was in The Missing, and he got spun off into his own show, Baptiste. But it's seriously charismatic, and he's like he's like a retired cop, he's like a retired detective who's like going back on these kind of cold cases and trying to crack them and stuff. I love a bit of cold cases. I love that. What's it called? Unforgotten. You watched that now?
No.
Unforgotten. Oh, I can't remember the name of the woman who's in it. She's great. Just cold case kind of things that come back up. A body's been discovered and it's 30 years old. That's my kind of detective work.
One I'd recommend to you, Hurk, is have you ever seen New Scotland Yard? Have you seen that show?
New Scotland. I've seen Scotland Yard.
I don't think they're related either. New Scotland Yard, I think, is from about 73. and it's probably like an influence on something like the Sweeney, but it's what's he called? John Kingdom, is he called? John Kingdom is played by John Woodvine, who's like the cop from American Werewolf in London, and he's like an old school copper who is teamed up with a young copper who's very much like, I'm breaking the rules, and he's like, nah, you're not. It's a good kind of mismatched thing, but again, it's sort of filmed. It's all sort of studio based, so it doesn't have the kind of longevity that something like the Sweeney has. But it's a really good police procedural show.
Was
Lots
it like
of good
an
guest stars?
ITV one?
ITV, kind of thing that wouldn't surprise me if it showed up in the Talking Pictures. It's a good show. It's a good show. You have like Bob Hoskins pops up as villains and things, and it's good. Very good guest stars. Yeah, sort of very old school copper with new young Alan Ward, DCI Alan Ward, who's a bit of a dickhead, and you like Woodvine, but he's a bit trying to break the rules, sort of beating people up. Woodvine's having none of it. It's that sort of older copper, younger copper.
I'll check it out. Yeah, I'll look out for that.
Let's say again. So your book Jinx Freeze is out on October 7th. Check it out, and you've got a website to see if it's your cup of tea. What's your website?
LordHurk.com, right?
That's right. Yeah, that's it.
Lord HURK.
We were saying recently that you've lost your title, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Or just Hurk again?
No, yeah, I've kind of eased that out. It's LordHurk.com, and otherwise people call me Lord.
Yeah.
Lord.
Yeah.
Lord.
Lovely stuff. Thanks to us for thinking of that one, because that wasn't someone else's idea. But do hit us with more ideas for top fives. We've got some more coming through. I just want to correct Nat before when you said the only other guest you've had is Haley. No, we had Billy on as well.
Oh, we did.
Yeah, I thought that as well.
Big apologies to Billy there.
Oh no,
you just seen him this week. He's with the stay with him. That's terrible.
I forgot.
What an asshole.
I forgot. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thanks, Hurk. It's really good to have you on. We've wanted to have you on for ages.
And let's come back on, and we can do film cops or just sleuths.
Yeah, TV sleuths.
Amateur, professional sleuths.
I thought we were going to do top 5 hats.
Hats is good. I could do top 5 hats.
Top 5 hats. I was quite keen on. You're not that bothered about hats, are you, Nat?
I'm just trying to think if I'd do a top 5 or what. I'd have to do some hat research and just do. It'd probably be similar to the flags one. Would have to research some hats and
just
go.
Get a book of hats. Go to the library. Have any books on hats? And then just do some research.
Yeah, I could do some research.
Hat Metcalf.
Nice. Very good. Very good. Thank you for listening.
Yeah, cheers. We doff our cap
be
to
back
you
soon. Bye.
Bye. Thanks, Hurk. Bye.
Cheers.